boys and girls, and welcome to another art and literature adventure with Miss Jane
and Mrs. Kane.
We're going to be sharing a book with you today and some art adventures. But Miss Kane, we like to start our day in a special way. Would you guide us on that?
We're going to do a 3-breath mindful breathing
Wonderful.
exercise. So here we go.
All right.
Perfect.
Oh, Miss Kane, I feel so much more relaxed. Thank you. Do you want to put that little pillow down here?
Yes, I do.
Okay, we'll tuck that down here.
Right
That
there?
adorable bit. Look at that. It coordinates too. Look at that. We are so
What a
stylish.
wonderful picture.
So, boys and girls, first of all, we'd like to welcome you. We hope that you're doing well, that you're staying safe, that you are having some joy in your life. And sort of the purpose of us getting together, first of all, Miss Kane and I are having social distancing, so we're being very safe and careful. But we wanted to share with you an artist that's kind of become, well, I think she's kind of becoming one of our favorites. Wouldn't you say, Miss Kane?
I think so, and she's had a remarkable life.
Oh, filled with adventure. She's kind of reminds me a little bit like the little engine that could, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, I may mispronounce her name, so I want to apologize ahead of time, but I say it as Yayoi Kusama. Now, how would you say it, Miss Kane?
Yayoi.
Yayoi.
Yayoi Kusama.
Kusama. I like that with the longer U sound.
Kusama.
Now, we're going to be reading and sharing a book with you today. It's for educational purposes only. Now, we purchased this book when we were at the San Francisco MoMA, which is the Museum of Modern Art in the city of San Francisco, but it's available at a lot of different vendors. Now, Miss Kane, you know how tricky I am, and I took the jacket off again.
She did it again.
Oh my goodness. Now, what do we call this front part of the book again?
The front cover.
I kind of gave it away by saying that, didn't I?
A little bit. You gave him a hint.
What about this part of the book?
That is the spine.
Wait, I have a spine too.
Of course you do.
I try to use it quite often. How about this part of the book?
It's the back.
The back. Now, sometimes on these little flaps, they'll give you a summary of the book. And then, you know what I really like, Miss Kane? You can read about the person who wrote the book, who is called, what do we call a person who writes a book?
An author.
An author, of course. And what do we
But
call?
she didn't write the book.
I know
Okay.
she didn't.
Okay.
But we can read about an
About the
author
person
on
who
there.
is, yes.
Because sometimes it's not the person it's about. And what do we call the person who illustrates?
She drew the picture. She's the artist.
So we have an author and an illustrator that are writing about a real live person. Now, Miss Kane, would this book be fiction or nonfiction?
It would be nonfiction. As a matter of fact, it would be a biography.
Because it is about a real person. So you might have heard the term like science fiction, which is made up books that have a scientific theme. But nonfiction, they're not made up, are they, Miss Kane?
No, they're not. As a matter of fact, this biography is written by someone else, so it's just a biography. But if Yayoi Kusama wrote this book about herself, it would be an autobiography.
Oh, so if I keep a journal and I write stories about myself and I get it published, I have written an autobiography.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that's a nice big word. Do you want to get started? And then I will, of course, interject with some little helpful information. And gentlemen, ladies, you may notice we have some decorative items here. These will be part of our storytelling today. So, Miss Kane, it's all yours.
I just wanted to let you know one more thing. In our library, in the section, the Dewey Decimal number for biographies is 921. So if you're looking for a biography, it's 921, and it's just for a single person. If there's multiple people in the book, it's 920.
They're almost like a zip code in the library.
There you go.
I like that.
So the author is Sarah Suzuki, and it's illustrated by Ellen Weinstein. And it's Yayoi Kusama, From Here to Infinity.
And infinity is really far. You know, I remember when Buzz Lightyear used that word, didn't he?
From here to infinity, yes. Yayoi Kusama was born in the country of Japan, on the island of Honshu, in a town called Matsumoto City. An old palace made of wood and stone overlooked a moat where swans swam.
That's a tongue twister.
Quite. The streets were lined with little shops, and snow-capped mountains rose in the distance, swallowing up the sun as it went down in the evening.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And I'm going to just cut in real quick here, Miss Kane. I happen to have a globe. I do have a collection of globes, which that's a whole other story. Now, a globe is a sphere that has a map. And on this map, we can see countries. We live in the United States, North America, state of California, city of Sacramento, right here on the map. Now, our person in this story lives across the ocean over here in the country of Japan.
Which ocean?
Oh, well, it's this big ocean right here, the Pacific.
Of course.
I'm sorry. The Atlantic is on the east coast of the United States. Pacific is on the the west coast. Cheese and crackers. And she is from the country of Japan, which is an island nation. And you'll notice that it's located close to the Philippines and to China. So I'm going to set this globe over here. And Miss Kane, please continue.
Yayoi's family owned nurseries where all kinds of flowers and vegetables grew, and workers tended the plants as they matured from seeds to sprouts to stalks. But Yayoi yearned for a different life, far from the countryside. She dreamed about what lay beyond the mountains, in places far from Matsumoto City. She longed to leave home and see the world.
You know, Miss Kane, that kind of reminds me in like The Wizard of Oz. Remember how Dorothy Gale lived on the farm and she kept wanting to go someplace else, didn't she?
Yes, she did. Yayoi's mother wanted her to stay home and learn old-fashioned manners, how to dress elegantly, walk demurely, eat politely, and find a proper husband.
Uh-oh.
But Yayoi wanted to be an artist. Every day she went outside with ink and brushes and paper. She drew things she saw and things she imagined. She looked closely at the pebbles that lined the riverbed and at the leaves and stalks of plants, and she drew them as chains of tiny cells that looked like dots. When she was older and studying in art school, her teachers disapproved of her work, and they demanded that Yayoi paint in the traditional, precise Japanese style. She wanted to go where she could live without rules.
Uh-oh. Now, I noticed that she's looking at a riverbed with lots of rocks and pebbles, lots of circular shapes. Circles are flat. They are not three-dimensional like a sphere. They are round, continuous line touching its tail. You'll notice that we have all these dots, and there's a lot of dot themes that we're going to talk about shortly.
When she was 28 years old, she packed up her silk kimonos and thousands of drawings and stuffed dollar bills into the toes of her shoes.
Oh my gosh.
It was her first airplane trip. There were only 4 other passengers, and the weather was stormy with rain and lightning. The airplane wobbled and dipped as it flew to America.
I would be terrified because that flight would have been 12 to 13 hours long, depending on if they stopped in Hawaii, but very far from Japan to New York City. Very far.
In New York, Yayoi went to the top of the Empire State Building, the tallest building in a city full of tall buildings. When she looked down, she saw buses and cars and yellow taxis zooming up and down the avenues, and bankers and teachers and artists rushing to work. From up on the 86th floor, they looked like dots. She felt very far from quiet Matsumoto City and her mother's rules. Here, it seemed anything was possible.
Now, I bet from way up there, a lot of those cars and buses look like polka dots going on in infinity.
You kind of can see this in the
I know,
illustration.
Absolutely. I love how the author is sharing not only the artist's vision, but also carrying the narrative.
Yayoi was about turning her drawings of dots into paintings. The dollar bills that she had brought to America quickly ran out, and she spent what little money she had left on paints and canvases. She worked day and night. She painted when she was cold. She painted when she was hungry. She painted when she was lonely. And she turned her dots into sculptures, too, into soft, stuffed tubes that covered sofas and chairs and boats.
Wow.
She was devoted to her dots. For her, they were a way of thinking about the world among the stars. As one dot among millions of others, they were a way of thinking about infinity.
Oh, and infinity is a lot to think about. And if she took those dots and made them into three-dimensional shapes, well, you could end up something like this tube. So that's a circle or a dot. But look at it. It's now three-dimensional, going forward in space.
Sometimes when she grew frustrated, she visited the Museum of Modern Art. She gazed at paintings by other artists, and she thought about why and how they were made. She looked at pictures of dancing girls and swirling night skies, trying to solve them as if they were puzzles.
And the swirling night sky, you might remember, boys and girls, that we've talked about starry nights. What a beautiful representation of dots. And that would have been painted like 40, 50 years before she saw it.
Her paintings seemed so different from those that she had seen at MoMA. When she at last was ready to show her work in public, she invited all the friends she had made in New York. When she arrived at the gallery, a crowd was spilling out onto the sidewalk. Her friends lifted her in the air, shouting, "Yayoi, you've finally done it!" Word about her artwork spread quickly. Her friends told their friends. Newspapers wrote about her work, and reporters clamored to interview her about her dots. Now she began to show them in other cities all over the United States and Europe.
United States and Europe, but I didn't hear her mention Japan.
Nope, they did not say that.
Interesting.
Her dots were covering the world. They appeared in Venice in thousands of dot-shaped mirrors scattered all over a big green lawn.
Oh, they almost look like bowling balls.
They do. And on a pumpkin on a pier.
Oh my goodness, look at that. We have a version of that right here.
On that
one
poster.
looks gigantic. If
It's
it's on a
huge.
pier, that's huge, Miss Kane.
On dresses and t-shirts, on people walking down the street, and in mirrored rooms where glowing dots were reflected and reflected again. An infinity of dots.
Oh my goodness. She likes to wear a lot of dots too. That's the infinity room that she created using mirrors. And when you look in there, you don't see an edge.
Having visited many countries all over the world, Yayoi returned to Japan. The country had changed since she left, and many different artists challenging the old traditional styles, as Yayoi had been doing all along.
So when she went back to her country of Japan, she was actually embraced. And people, just like what you said in the book, had kind of changed from the old ways, the more traditional ways. We always have to remember our history to respect it. But change is what keeps us moving forward.
She still lives in Japan, and she continues to paint her dots every day.
And she is getting old, isn't
She's
she?
90 years old.
Or 90 years young, depending on how you think about it. And these are some examples of her artwork at the back of the book, some actual pieces. Now, the show has been traveling around the country, and it's incredibly popular. My sister was able to see, here's a picture from the Infinity Room when it was in Seattle, and you were able to step onto almost like a little dock or platform, and you're in there for just a minute. But my sister said you felt like you were alone in the universe. This next picture, you're allowed to put polka dots everywhere. Now, boys and girls, we don't want you to go home and start sticking stickers all over your kitchen and saying I'm making art. But it's so fun to see that in all the white furniture. It really shows up beautifully,
It
doesn't
started out with nothing.
I
There
know,
was
right?
no
And then
dots on
boom,
it
an
at all.
explosion of color.
And then as you came in to see her art, you're given a little sticker, a packet of stickers. Probably, I think
Exactly.
5.
I think so.
5 stickers, and you could put your sticker anywhere you want. And this is after many people have come to see this piece of art.
And I imagine if it was shown in Seattle, would look different than it's shown in Paris. So there'd be different art. And there she is Miss Kane, she's almost in camouflage, isn't she?
Just about.
So this is another artist that you can explore, that you can be inspired by. And there's all types of ways that you can make circular shapes. You can trace objects at your house. This is just a roll of tape. This is just a bottle cap. Now this is part of a pool noodle. You can take this and you can stamp it into paint and make polka dots. Now don't go stamping and making polka dots all over your house. You might notice, oh, I'm sorry about that little crane. Miss Kane has made us a bunch of lovely little cranes, and I'll be posting on my Facebook page how you too can create wonderful little cranes, origami style, folding and bending, and then I think you actually even puff them up a little bit, don't you, Miss Kane?
They're the symbol of peace, which we kind of need that now.
Oh, we always could use peace. I'm just going to share a couple other books, and then we're going to say goodbye. This is the Dot book. And it's very popular, and it shows another use of a circle. Don't think that you can't make art. Make a mark, get started. This book will inspire you to do that. And I love this one because it's called Only One You. And they are little fish that are actually painted pebbles like this. So if you're looking for a project and you happen to have some pebbles around, you can paint on these. Now the art behind us is an example of one of her beautiful sculptures here. There's also a poster from her art show, and then down here just a little commemorative bit of art from the country of Japan. We are one world, and all of this art from this wonderful artist has inspired fashion, has inspired sculptures, paintings. There's wonderful films and books. Now, Miss Kane, do you have any closing remarks for our lovely friends who are watching?
Yes. I hope you're still reading your library books if you haven't finished them yet. And I hope you're keeping them in a very, very safe place. Because remember, when we come back, you're going to return them. And then we're going to have a very special Reading is Fun distribution where you get to choose a book of your own.
Oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. And artists, and this is for all of my art students who are wondering, where is my artwork? It's nice and safe. It will be returned to you, so you don't worry. But why don't you get busy making some new projects? We love you. We're thinking about you. Stay safe.
Yes.
Stay happy. And thank you for visiting.